on. And what's up, everybody? We in here. We are in here. The Bama Elite podcast on a Thursday. Touchdown. Alabama Magazine. We're rocking and rolling right here, getting you set up for Alabama, Louisiana, Monroe this weekend. Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa got the three baddest men in the building. We're talking about Justin Smith, the lead scouting and recruiting analyst for TDA. We got Patrick Dow, P-Money Dowd here, breaking news reporter for TDA. And I'm yours truly, Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama Magazine. Happy to have all of you guys in here checking us out. And before we get into the conversation, gotta always remind you guys of this. So when you're not listening to the Bama Elite, though we encourage you to do so, when you're not listening to the Bama Elite podcast, you gotta check out, tune in to the Big Game College Football Podcast Network and audio stream for the best college football coverage in the South. So if you can't get the Bama Elite, us three, check out the Big Game College Football Podcast Radio Network and podcast network and audio stream to get all that coverage right there on your college football. But we start this off by swinging this to Pat. And Pat, what's going on, man? Happy Thursday to you.
Yeah, happy Thursday back at you. Good to be back in here talking with all you guys. A bit of a hectic week for Alabama, just all the fallout from the Texas game. It's been really interesting to see the reactions. And look, they're going to have an opportunity to get back on track this week against ULM Monroe, who Nick Saban has a lot of respect for, as we heard yesterday.
Has a lot of respect for those Warhawks there. But we're going to flip this over to a man that he represents Team No Sleep. Justin, what's going on, man?
Similar to Pat, yeah, I'm excited to be on with you guys always on the Bama Elite. Excited to, I guess, turn the corner or turn the page to the next team here. I know a lot has been talked about Texas this week. You'll probably forget that Alabama even has a game this weekend. So let's switch our attention to Louisiana Monroe and let's talk about what makes the Warhawks a good opponent for Alabama to go up against this weekend in terms of improving, continue to try to take strides this season.
Well, guys, I mean, Coach Saban had another one of his famous rants, statements, spats at the media on Wednesday, and this spat was geared toward the teachers who have made a difference in Coach Saban's life, but more than that, it doesn't matter who the opponent is, whether they are a higher-ranking opponent, low-ranking opponent, high caliber, low caliber, doesn't matter. Saban wants domination. It doesn't matter who is being put in front of the Crimson Tide to play. And after a narrow win over Texas, 20-19, and so many people had so much to say and still have a lot to say, now the page is turned, like you guys mentioned, to Louisiana Monroe, a team that, back in 2007, I was primarily in the 8th or 9th grade at that time. And, Monroe, they got a 21-14 victory over Alabama that season. John Parker Wilson had 2 interceptions. Monroe had 3 touchdowns, including 2 rushing. Wasn't Nick Saban's brightest moment in his first year at Alabama, though that was 15, 16 years ago. He still remembers that, so the man can hold a grudge. The man can definitely hold that grudge. But looking at this matchup, Pat, I know it's not a sexy matchup. It's not sexy whatsoever.
Far from
it. It's not sexy whatsoever. And fans of Alabama football, then look at this and go, it's ULM Monroe. What can you learn? What can you glean? How can you get better? Because it's not a team that's not going to necessarily push you in the way that you need to be pushed. But at the same time, reflecting back on Coach Saban, hey, everybody's a challenge on the schedule. Pat, in what way, if there is, in what way could this game be used to help Alabama get better?
Well, this game could be used as kind of getting the basics all ironed out and straight, because throughout the first 2 games, they haven't had those straight at all. If you look all the way back to the Utah State game, even though they won and they shut them out, I believe it was 55-0, if my memory is correct, they didn't run the ball particularly consistently well that game. And a lot of that just came down to cohesion on the offensive line, playing together as a unit. And when you look at the Texas game, I mean, it was the most undisciplined game of the Nick Saban era with the 15 penalties. And there's a lot of some pass interference calls on the outside and guys lining up offside. So I think games like these are going to be used to just iron out the basics, get those right, because Alabama has an absolute gauntlet coming up in terms of SEC schedule.
Yes, I'm piggybacking off what Pat said. It is definitely about consistency. Of course, you have to be consistent in this particular matchup. Specifically, I think towards the run game. I think about a lot of our attention is going to be turned towards that, because this is a game where, although the competition may not be as it will be later in the season in terms of going up against that SEC gauntlet, but similar to what Nick Saban said in I think it was his press conference on yesterday, referring back to the Texas game. I know we're still talking about that matchup, but going back to the play where Jason McClellan broke free, said Alabama's offensive line, everybody did what they needed to do. It was a great play, a beautiful play. Everybody did their job. So I think that is what Alabama's coaching staff, and I think that is what Alabama players are going to strive to do in this particular matchup. Let's take a look at things that we can do well ourselves in terms of the technique, in terms of taking the right amount of steps when it comes to the offensive line, just being consistently good against a team like ULM. I think those type of things will translate from this game and move forward throughout the season. So I think it's all about consistency. If you're going up against a team like this, and possibly Vanderbilt next week as well, who may not have the talent that you have, so you want to make sure that you do everything that you can do right, so you can improve, so you can get better as a player and as a team. So I think consistency is going to be very important this weekend.
Well, guys, also this week, Terry Bowden, coach of ULM, had his press conference. He's in his second year with the Warhawks. Coach Bowden has a lot of experience coaching in the state of Alabama. He coached at Auburn. He coached at North Alabama. He also coached at Samford. But he made a point during his press conference. He said, hey, after looking back at last week, anything's possible now. Nobody had A&M losing to Appalachian State. It happened. Nobody had Notre Dame losing to Marshall, but it happened. Nobody had Georgia Southern beating Nebraska, but it happened. I'm not saying that Alabama's going to lose to Louisiana Monroe, but what I am saying here is starting this off with the offensive line, Pat. I know Coach Saban loves depth, and he loves to mix and match his guys, but when you're trying to build continuity and get 5 guys to play as one, how important is it going to be for this game get those 5 guys? It doesn't necessarily matter who they are, but get those 5 guys you trust that can play as one and be able to roll with that and have these 5 as your 5. Because I think Eric Wolford's the guy. Eric Wolford was the right coach for the job. He was the right hire for the job. But on a team where there's so much depth and you want to use everybody and you want to mix and match, how important is it this weekend to say, okay, let's get our 5 that we trust, that we know that can lay a hat on a hat, and let's roll with these 5.
Well, whether it's this week or next week against Vanderbilt, they got to figure it out soon here, because they can't go into conference play without a consistent running game. They're going into too many hostile environments where if they can't run the football, it's going to be way too much pressure on the receivers and way too much pressure on Bryce Young to make plays. Because like we saw against Texas, the running game was not consistent at all, and they were in a ton of trouble that game. And they're going to face. And look, whether Texas proves to be a really good team by the end of the year or not, I mean, they're going to play some pretty damn good teams coming up on their schedule, like Arkansas and at Tennessee. Those crowds are going to be absolutely crazy, and those teams are going to be very familiar and ready to go for them. So they need to. Again, it doesn't necessarily need to be this weekend. I don't think, because I'm not Nick Saban. I'm not in these coaching meetings, but I mean, it's got to happen soon. They got to figure out a 5 soon, just roll with it.
I think they do have a 2-game window as well, and with ULM coming up this weekend and Vanderbilt coming in before you are battling it out with a tough schedule. I think this schedule is turning out to be a lot tougher than I think we expected even at the beginning of the year, because people sort of expected Tennessee to be better than they were in the past, but it's Tennessee. I think you needed to see it on the field. So I think they've shown it early in the season. Even Arkansas, I think they've shown it as well. They are proven that they are threats this season to make some noise inside the SEC in particular. So I think they do have a 2-game window as well. Try to gain that consistency all over the run game. Seems that they have been a little bit better in terms of zone running and outside runs early in the season. So hopefully they can have a complete run game in the future. But I do feel they have a 2-game window at the moment. Try to get it figured out over the next couple of weeks.
Well, guys, if you look at it now, just to flipping out to the defensive side of the football, Coach Saban brought up Justin Eli Ricks, brought him up in practice this week and talked about it. The guy's got tremendous talent. We know he does coming over from LSU, but Saban insinuated probably not the best practice player right now, probably struggling in practice. That's the reason why he has not been getting on the field the way we would like to see him get, on that field. Now, Terrion Arnold stepped up against Texas quite a bit there in the second half, being able to defend on one Xavier Worthy. But Justin, in your opinion, even though, because we're not there, we're not at practice, we would love to be out there, but we're not at practice. We can only take what Coach Saban says. But in this juncture, even though it's being insinuated Eli Ricks may not have the best moments out there at practice, at some point, do you feel like we have to see him, especially with Kool-Aid McKinstry not having a great game against Texas, Kyrie Jackson not having a great game against Texas, and everybody has that film and knowing how to attack? Is this at some point we have to see Eli Ricks?
Yeah, I think like I've said on this show a lot, I do like Eli Ricks' skill set, and I think it is, I guess, sort of alarming and does raise questions when he's not on the field, when you know how talented he is. Like you said, we're not at practice, so we don't know if this is an effort thing at practice or is it a playbook thing? Is he not digesting things quickly enough in terms of learning a new playbook? But questions are definitely surrounding his lack of playing time. And another thing I do want to bring up with us talking about Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think McKinstry made several great plays as well against Texas. I think he made several clutch plays, specifically down the stretch. I think he was like one-on-one against one of Texas running backs out of the backfield, and he made a stop. I think Texas was forced to kick a field goal. And even some of those pass interferences that he had, those were, like Nick Saban said, those are calls that are hard to call, those pass interference calls. Even that call where it didn't get called in the back of the end zone, it could have been called. Just taking a look at how things had been before then when he was matched up against Sanders, Texas' tight end. So I think Kool-Aid McKinstry has played solid at times. I think he definitely has some areas to improve, but I thought he played pretty good. I think a lot of the bad is outweighing the good in this matchup as a whole. Just taking a look back at Alabama and Texas, but I do feel that Eli Ricks, like I said, has that unique skill set. We have wondered why he is not getting on the field, specifically that last game. He did not get a single snap. So I think going back to, like you said, at practice, we're not out there. So I wonder if it is an effort thing. Is he not putting forward enough effort, or is he just trying to get things together in terms of learning the playbook, or is he just not playing consistent in practice? But I am excited to see if he can possibly get on the field in SEC play. I think he definitely will get on the field the next couple of weeks at some point in time in the game.
Yeah, I think we are going to see him, but look, like you said, Justin, the guy's got a ton of ability. He obviously has a ton of potential coming over from LSU. But if he's not practicing well, like if Nick Saban's right and you say he's not practicing well, then he shouldn't play. Because you earn your playing time on Monday and Tuesday as opposed to Saturday. Though you earn the right to get in the game. So, if he is struggling in practice, if it's a playbook thing, then you know what? I think that's just time. He just got to figure it out. But if it's like an ability and functionality thing, and he's just not, and there's just guys that are better than him, then no, Alabama should go with the other guys that they have back there.
Continuing the conversation here, guys, for Alabama and Louisiana Monroe and how this game, in what ways could this game help the Crimson Tide? We look over now at the wide receivers. And the wide receivers that Coach Saban, he did say they came of age late in the fourth quarter against Texas, especially on the final drive from Bryce Young. Jermaine Burton made some plays. Trayshawn Holden made some plays. Ja'Cory Brooks had a few catches in there. Kobe Prentice had a few catches in there. So the guys came of age late. But in this matchup against ULM, starting off, Pat, with you, the ability to get that separation right, because I feel like as fans, as consumers of college football, we've become so used to Alabama receivers quickly getting that separation, whether it was as route runners like Jerry Jeudy, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, whether it was guys straight speed like Jalen Waddle, who was also a good route runner, and Jamison Williams. We've been so used to guys being able to, no matter where they were, at what point of the route, get that separation. And against Texas, it just looked like Guys were not getting open. They were not able to work back to Bryce Young when he was scrambling. So in this matchup, how do you work on creating that separation and having confidence in doing that as you get to more of these SEC challenges?
Well, I think Nick Saban said they got to play a little bit faster, and they got to be kind of just play sure of themselves, because this is for the most part, this is a completely new group of receivers that Bryce Young is working with in this offense. And look, and Texas didn't do anything to what Nick Saban said. Texas didn't do anything that surprised them offensively. They played them how they thought they would play them. So it's kind of just on them to kind of win their individual matchups, know what they're doing, read the coverages correctly. There's a few times where Texas was running zone and then required the receiver to stay in the gap there as opposed to keep running. That messed up some of the timings from Bryce Young. But look, okay, it's a team like Louisiana Monroe. If you're playing fast, you're going to be open. So it's going to be if fans at home watching, you're going to notice if the receivers are playing fast against this team.
Yeah, I think it all comes with time. Like you said earlier, Pat. I think in terms of building chemistry, Bryce Young with these wide receivers, this is a new wide receiver group, 3 new starting wide receivers, specifically Prentice way on the younger side because he's really legitimately a true freshman. Last year he was playing at Clear High School in Clear, Alabama. So I think time is definitely going to play a role in these guys creating that separation that Alabama fans want to see. I know similar to what you said, Pat, specifically Prentice not sitting down in the zone when Bryce expected him to sit down in the zone. I think that is something that those guys are going to learn as they continue to grow. And like Nick Saban said, play fast, play confident. Pat said to play sure of yourself. I think that is going to be beneficial for those guys as well, making sure that they run their routes with confidence, make sure they're getting in and out of their breaks efficiently. I think that is something that's going to come with time, hopefully build chemistry. So that is why this game this weekend is going to be very important, and that's why Nick Saban is stressing, especially when you're going up against Louisiana Monroe and Vanderbilt over the next 2 weeks, that you have to play these games like you're going up against Georgia every week, like you're going up against a team that you could play in a national championship in the future, in terms of your effort, in terms of your preparation, in terms of how you go through each snap. I think that is going to be important over the next couple of weeks, making sure that you take your time with everything and play confident, gain more confidence, and just play fast. I think that is going to be important specifically for the wide receivers.
As we look at guys, having Cameron Latu back is a big deal. I mean, didn't play against Utah State. He had about 4 to 5 catches against Texas. And I remember he spoke this week about him being back and just how happy he is to be back, to be in this offense, and the timing that he's having to build back with Bryce Young. I mean, Cam Latu missed a lot of fall camp, if not the whole fall camp, due to a tweaked knee. So he's been catching passes from Bryce Young after every practice, trying to get himself back in that frame of, okay, if Bryce does this, I got to do this. If Bryce does that, I got to do that over there. So having a Cam Latu against Louisiana Monroe, a guy that can do everything at that tight end position. I mean, going to you, Justin, I mean, how pivotal is it to have the tight end that's got that chemistry there with Bryce Young? I know fans are intrigued by Amari Nablack. They're intrigued by Danny Lewis Jr. They're intrigued by, Miles Kitzman, more of a blocking tight end. Latu really likes what Robbie Oots brings to the table in terms of his physicality. But having a guy like Latu that's played with Bryce Young last year, and to have him back in this offense against Monroe and working that chemistry back, I mean, how huge is that for this offense?
I think the thing that makes Cameron Latu really good is the fact that simply is he's the best tight end on Alabama's roster at this particular point in time. But I think the biggest strength of his game right now is his ability after the catch. I think that is sort of underrated in terms of what he brings to the table. He's a tough runner after the catch, can pick up some yards, blocking, can make some successful blocks, still growing in there as he has made the transition from linebacker to tight end. So I think he's going to be a huge part of Alabama's offense moving forward, specifically as a safety valve. I think he did it a couple of times against Texas when no one seemed to get open. Bryce Young was able to find Cameron Latu and Jahmyr Gibbs several times when when the Crimson Tide needed someone to step up when the wide receivers did not look as if they were getting separation. So I think he's going to be a huge weapon for Alabama in the future, specifically, like I said, as a safety valve, a guy who can get the football to in space. Like I said, I think he's a guy who can make some moves after the catch.
Yeah, I think not having Cameron Latu for a majority of fall camp kind of showed, especially in this first game against Texas, because naturally, I mean, he was coming back as Alabama's most experienced pass catcher from a season ago, and they needed some sort of security blanket like that to kind of move the chains a little bit, just get these 6-7 yard catches and just keep drives alive, which they weren't really able to create against the Longhorns. So getting him back reintegrated is going to be really big. And also he's a big threat down there in the red zone. I know I bring it up all the time. He caught about 8 touchdowns last season. So I think he makes everything a little bit easier because like Nick Saban and all of us talk about tight ends all the time. There's such a mismatch, whether it's safeties, linebackers, whoever wants to guard them, they're pretty much going to be a mismatch athletically for anybody on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, before, guys, we continue with this breaking down of Alabama and seeing how this game against ULM prepares it for down the road, we got a big sponsor here, Pat, Prized Picks. Talk about them a little bit.
Absolutely. Prized Picks, a new daily fantasy app that's going to be partnering with us. So with Prize Picks, all first-time users that deposit and use our promo code will receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So if you deposit $100 into Prize Picks, they will give you $100 back. So Prize Picks is the best way to have action on the game in states like California, Florida, Texas, Georgia, and over 70% of the United States. Prize Picks is currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So how does it work? You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they go score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. So, for example, on Saturday, I have 3 projections for that game, which includes Bryce Young to throw for less than 275 passing yards. Because when we look at the Utah State game, I know it was a big blowout win, but he threw for less than 200 yards. So that's where my way of thinking is going. I am going with Kobe Prentice to have more than 51.5 receiving yards. I think some of these young receivers are going to step up and have a little bit more. I think 51.5 is a bit modest, so I think he'll be able to reach that. And then lastly, I am projecting Jahmyr Gibbs to have less than 88.5 rushing yards because there's a lot of running backs. They're going to get a lot of work against Louisiana Monroe, and that doesn't mean he's not going to have a good game, but that's just my line of thinking. I think they're going to split the carries up a bit more during that game. So at PrizePicks, you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's and women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and more. PrizePicks entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and it's that easy. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. Download the PrizePicks app today and play daily fantasy sports with us. Make sure to use the promo code BAMA100. Again, BAMA100 when you sign up. And we are happy to have PrizePicks along with us.
Yeah, I agree with mostly all of your picks, Pat. I know I saw one of them earlier. Another one that Alabama fans may like is the 19.5 rushing yards by Bryce Young. I think that is a really interesting one. Not sure if you should go more or less with that one, just based on how Bryce Young has ran the football in the past. I thought that was another interesting one, but a great app for Alabama fans and football fans, college football fans, just sports fans in general to use.
That's Bama 100, people. Bama 100. Get those picks on right there. Appreciate Pat bringing us that information there from Prize Picks, sponsor here for the Bama Elite podcast. Well, guys, we jump now to Alabama's defense and how does an offense like Louisiana Monroe prepare or help this defense be better? This is a defense that, as Pat mentioned, shut out Utah State. Got pressure to Logan Bonner. He couldn't do anything offensively, but this Bama defense struggled with Quinn Ewers prior to him getting hurt last week, and then had some issues there trying to slow down a hobbled Hudson Carr out there on the field as well. But Monroe, they've got a couple of guys that will give a look. They got a couple of guys that present a little bit of a challenge. And once again, Pat, Terry Bowden come into this game with confidence here as a coach of this program. So defensively, when you look at Will Anderson, when you look at Dallas Turner, when you look at the guys up front, Byron Young and Tim Smith, when you look at the guys in the secondary, how does a game like this get you better, especially when you come off, a game against Texas where you fought the Heat, you fought Quinn Ewers, you fought Xavier Worthy, you fought Jordan Whittington, you fought 15 penalties, you fought a whole bunch of stuff. How does a game against ULM get you better?
Well, much like the offense here, just the little things, finishing plays. They got back. They were able to put some pressure on the quarterback last week, but they just weren't finishing plays. And same thing with the penalties. Clean it up in the back end a little bit. Just try to avoid the holding calls and pass interference calls as much as possible. I know it's pretty tough in Alabama system to play cornerback, but you're going to need to figure those sorts of plays out like guys of the past did. So I think zeroing in on the little things, that's what these games are very important for. And I know Chandler Rogers, the quarterback, is actually a decent little player for ULM. So just zeroing in on him, just trying to, get pressure on him, make them throw quick passes, maybe get them into some mistakes early on, because this Alabama team also doesn't have a turnover yet. I think they're going to be gunning and trying to get that first interception or fumble recovery this game.
Yeah, they definitely have to be more consistent on the defensive side of the football, be more disciplined. I think that's going to be very important with the penalties. But I think another thing that Alabama needs to focus on over the next couple of weeks is how to dial up pressure on quarterbacks in terms of, like you said, finishing plays, Pat, because we know if I'm Louisiana Monroe, I saw what Utah State did. I saw what Texas did. I'm not letting Will Anderson and Dallas Turner tee off on my quarterback either, yo. Let's get the football out of my quarterback's hands pretty quickly, roll away from Will Anderson, do similar things that Texas and Utah State did. So I think it's going to be a great test for Will Anderson, Dallas Turner. Those guys get tested in a similar way they have been tested throughout the year in terms of teams trying to avoid them, trying to neutralize them. So this should be a great opportunity for some other guys to find blitzing lanes, get better in terms of blitzing, getting better at putting pressure on the quarterback, like teams are going to do throughout this season, try to take away Will Anderson as much as possible. If I was ULM's offensive coordinator, that is probably the first bulletin on my board throughout the week. We have to eliminate him as much as possible in terms of him trying to disrupt my offense. So I think that is something that we have to watch in terms of Alabama's defense, see who else steps up if Louisiana Monroe tries to take away Will Anderson, those edge rushers as much as possible.
Absolutely, Justin. And one thing I want to look at is the continuation of growth from Jalen Moody. Jalen Moody's been playing great ball these last 2 weeks. I'm not saying that he's the next Reuben Foster, absolutely not. But I'm saying he is putting you in the mindset of those Reggie Raglins, those Sean Dion Hamiltons, those guys that fit those gaps, that thump, that make plays. Nick Saban talked about it. He plays extremely hard. He plays extremely disciplined. DeMarco Hellams talked about it. The preparation that Moody has put in these 5 years has really paid off. Saban talked about it as well. So I want to see the continued year of growth from Moody, but also, other inside linebackers, growth from Deontay Lawson, growth from a Kendrick Blackshire, growth from a G.I. Campbell if he's able to go out there and take the field. So growth from a lot of these guys defensively. You mentioned it. You mentioned it, Justin. Playing discipline, playing sound, playing on key, hitting your gaps, following gap assignment, gap control, and things of that nature. All of those aspects very, very important here for this football team. But I want to continue to see the growth here from the guys on defense, especially at the linebacker position. But we actually got a few questions here in the chat line, and we'll go with this. Pork Rinds is writing in. Is it really Pete Golding's fault that the DBs don't look for the ball? Is it really his fault that the DBs could not cover the Texas receivers? Is it really Pete Golding's fault? So here's Pork Rinds here with the thought up. Is it Pete Golding's fault that the DBs had issues? Pat, I'll start with you with Pork Rinds' question.
Is it Pete Golding's fault? Is that the question?
Yes, that's the question.
Okay. No, that's the. I don't. he can call the plays, call the coverages like that, but when it comes down to making plays, I'm not necessarily going to put that on Pete Golding. It's not like he's out there with a video game controller controlling everybody. These guys got to turn around and make plays when they're in position.
I definitely agree with you, Pat. I think even Saban brought up when Xavier Worthy beat Kyrie Jackson. He said the guy, a fast guy, just got deeper than Kyrie Jackson. You can't. It's hard to defend speed, of course, but this guy is fast. And you watch his film all week. Anybody who has watched Texas, even going back to last season, he's one of the fastest players in college football in terms of his speed. And I think he's going to continue to make a name for himself at the wide receiver position. I'm talking about Xavier Worthy, of course. So I think it is more so on the defensive backs, of course. The coaches, since you are a coach, I guess you have to get some of the blame, but I lean more towards the defensive backs in terms of keeping up with wide receivers, knowing when the guy is a little bit faster than you, being aware of that. So impacting and just changing your coverage technique in terms of defending a fast and speedy wide receiver. Also getting your head around. I know a lot of people in the chat are saying that, and that's really important. I talk about it a lot. I think that is something that has to be done on a consistent basis. Some of the best defensive backs in the game are able to do that, simply getting your head around. So it's pretty common sense. So you can see the football. You don't have eyes in the back of your head. So I think most coaches try to train defensive backs in terms of when the wide receiver turn around, you want to try to turn your head around that same time as well. So I think that is something that Alabama's defensive backs and defensive backs as a whole will continue to try to do. I know I talk about Eli Ricks a lot, but he does it. He did in the past on a consistent basis. So I'm excited to see if he can possibly find a way on the field, and just excited to see how that cornerback competition will continue to shake out. So I lean more towards the defensive backs, but I guess the coaches can get some of the blame.
Well, folks, as we're getting ready to wrap this thing up here on a Thursday, remember, if you cannot catch the Bama Elite right here, we want you to catch us. If you can't catch the Bama Elite, or when you're not watching the Bama Elite, you got to check out the Big Game College Football Podcast Network and audio stream for the best college football coverage around the South. So be sure to check that out right there. Big Game College Football Network, our podcast network and audio stream there. Well, guys, as we look at kind of putting a bow on this thing in terms of our Alabama and UL Monroe here, the game will be at 3 p.m. Central Time. So that will be on the SEC network. Don't know who will be the commentating cast, for that game, but it will be on the SEC network. So starting this thing off, Pat, with you, what do you want to see ultimately? Like in this game, what's the number one thing that you want to see? We want to see a whole bunch of things improve, absolutely. But if you had to pick one that you want to see, Bama's got to hammer this now. What's the number one thing for you?
Better run game. Got to have a better run game. It just helps so much more. It just helps so much more throughout the entirety of your team. It gives your defense a break. It sets up the pass. And in terms of the pass protection too, the guy gets some stuff cleaned up too. So just developing that offensive line, getting a consistent run game, because they have so many talented running backs on their team, and to not be able to utilize them on a consistent basis is just it's really going to cause some problems down the stretch. So Alabama really needs to zero in on playing more physical up front and creating those lanes for their all their talent back there.
Yeah, I think we're always on the separate sides of the coin, me and you, Pat. But I think the Crimson Tide, I think they need to definitely clean up in terms of the wide receiver position, in terms of those guys creating separation, whether that is playing faster, different route combinations or things like that, because I feel if they can clean that up, wide receivers be more explosive, play fast, play confident, I think Alabama's offense can be pretty much unstoppable if those guys are able to get open, just based on Bryce Young's ability with his arm and the way that he's able to extend plays in a way that he looks as if he's gaining more confidence in terms of being a runner. So I think Alabama's offense will be hard to stop, really dang near impossible if they can gain some confidence with their wide receivers over the next couple of weeks.
Both of you guys are taking offense. I love it. I'm going to go defense, though. I want to see more guys emerge. I want to see more guys step up and take this pressure off of Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. The next starting in this game, who wants to be that guy? Who has to be that guy? Who's ready and who's taking the ownership in being that guy? I mean, we've seen Jalen Moody take that ownership? Who's behind him? Will it be a Byron Young taking that ownership? Will it be a Jaheim Otis? Will it be a Justin Boygby? Who is going to be somebody when if they're chipping on Will Anderson, if they're helping out on Dallas Turner, here is my chance to hit home and rock somebody's skull and rock somebody's world and make a name for myself out here defensively. And it doesn't necessarily matter who it is, whether it's on the defensive line, whether it's a linebacker, whether it's a defensive back, who is ready to answer the bell and hit home if the team is chipping or assisting on keeping Will Anderson and Dallas Turner away from the quarterback. So, Pat, I love it. Offensive line, you got to have it. Justin, wide receivers, I'm with you right there. But for me, after you know what you get in Dallas and Will. You know what you're getting in those two. But who is next to hit home? That's what I'm going to be checking out.
Yeah, developing that rush, especially on the interior, that's something Alabama's been really trying to figure out here. Since fall camp, that was one of the biggest questions coming in. So, developing anything up front that's going to take any sort of pressure off Will Anderson and Dallas Turner is going to be a really big plus for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, Steven. I guess to close out, I guess we're going to turn our attention to, some projections and some prediction in terms of our players of the game. I can start it off, get my prediction in. I don't know how many points Alabama is favored or anything. I just
Nick Saban is not for the point spread. He's not.
Yeah, better not read it, even though it's 50. It better not bring any attention to it.
Yeah, I'm going off the top of the dome. I'm thinking probably 58-10. I just said first score that came to my mind. I'm thinking 58-10 in terms of my score prediction.
Well, like I said, I'm not being on the score projections, but I do think Alabama is going to cover that 49.5 spread. I think they're due to kind of get rolling here on offense and defense. I think they're going to force them. I think they will. I'm going to predict that they will force a turnover this weekend. They're too long overdue for it.
Okay, so Pat, who forces the turnover and who gets it?
No clue. It's just going to happen. It's got to happen.
Just got to happen. I mean, Byron Young was very passionate this week about that's bothering us. We not being able to force a turnover the first 2 weeks of the season, especially after last year. They started off with a combined 5 forced turnovers, 3 of those against Miami, 2 of those against Mercer. For me, I'm going to go 49-0 straight up. 49-0 straight up. I mean, ULM Monroe, they've got some talent. But I think this is an Alabama team that needed that type of an ugly win against Texas to kind of see, okay, this is truly where we are in relation to the goal. And we're not a national championship team just yet. But if we build on this and clean some things up, we absolutely can be. And I echo your point, Pat. I do see a turnover in this game. I don't know who the turnover will come from. I thought last week DeMarco Helms was going to do it. Did not necessarily do it. He could have had it if he hung on to the ball. He didn't quite hang on to it. So I don't know who the turnover will come from this week, but I do see Alabama getting that turnover because I kind of miss seeing that ball out belt everywhere. I mean, I haven't seen the ball out belt in 2 weeks. I haven't seen nobody hold that thing and parade that thing around. So looking forward to seeing that huge form of motivation be put out there for the players. But people, that's going to do it here for the Bama Elite Podcast. Touchdown, Alabama Magazine, right here on YouTube with the baddest 3 guys out here. Justin Smith, lead scout and recruiting analyst for TDA. Patrick P. Money Dow, breaking news reporter. Yours truly, Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama Magazine. And until Sunday, folks, as we'll bring the recap, we will see you then.